you so much for joining me at my new channel, Everyone's Books and Tea. This channel is going to be dedicated to two of my favorite things, which is books and drinking tea. So I figured the best way to start off this channel was to play a TBR game, and it's a TBR game I based on the seasons of the year. So September is the kickoff to my favorite season, which is fall, like many people out there. And my game is actually based around the seasons of the month. So let me show you the game board before we get started. So this is the game board. You may notice it doesn't really have a lot of fall feeling to it, and that's because this game board is based off of summer. So my game board is going to change as the seasons change. Because fall does not technically start until the end of September, we will be using the summer board for the month of September. But because of the way that the prompts are created, we can still get fall prompts during this game. So we'll kind of explain the prompts as we go through the game, but basically we're gonna roll the dice and work our way around the board. You can notice that each circle is a different color, and that corresponds to one of these bags up here. And then each bag has a different type of prompt in it. So let's get started with our first roll and see what our first book on our TBR is. All right, so we got a 4 for our first roll, and we landed on pink. Alright, so for our first roll, we got the color pink. So let's grab the pink bag and see what our first prompt of the game is. So this is the pink bag. Within this bag, there are several different types of prompts. There's prompts that have to do with the plot of a book. There's just miscellaneous prompts. And then there's also the title of 5 series that I'm either in the middle of or want to start reading. So let's see what our first prompt of the game is. All right, so for our first prompt, we got a book that's in a trilogy. All right, so we're actually going to choose 2 books for each prompt, and that's because I'm going to choose a physical book as well as an electronic book. I have like 1,700 electronic books on my TBR list. So this way I kind of have an option of reading either the physical book or the electronic book. So let's look at our physical book choices first. Books that are in a trilogy that we can choose from. The first is Truly Devious, which many of you probably already heard of, by Maureen Johnson. It's based on a true crime aficionado, Stevie, who ends up going to a private school in Vermont where a unsolved case happened years and years ago. And when she hears about this, her goal is to solve that case, and the trilogy kind of takes us through her solving of that case. So that's our first option. All right, and then our second option is Scarlet Odyssey by C.T. Waritsi. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce the last name, but this book is a part of a trilogy. I actually read this book a couple years ago and really enjoyed it, but as it's been a couple years, I want to reread it before I make my way through the rest of the trilogy. So this book is a fantasy set in a world where women are the only ones that are allowed to wield magic. The book centers around a 18-year-old boy named Salo, who doesn't like to conform to the expectations of his tribe, basically, and he decides that he wants to wield magic. His tribe leader, who is a queen, decides to allow him this, but if he does become a magic wielder, he's not allowed to stay in the tribe, so she sends him on a quest that takes him many thousands of miles away from his homeland. And this first book in the series centers around that quest and the people that he meets along the way. All right, so I think between these 2 books, I'm actually going to go with Scarlet Odyssey. I'm ready to get back into this series and read the last 2 in the trilogy, so I want to get through this first one so I can see what happens in the rest of the trilogy. All right, and then for our electronic book read, I actually already know which book I'm choosing, and it's The 3-Body Problem by last name Liu. I'm really not sure how to pronounce the first name. The reason I'm choosing this book is that I participate in a yearly science fiction fantasy challenge where each month there's a different challenge for a book that you have to read that meets that prompt. And for this month, it is to read a book that was translated from another language. This book was originally written in Chinese before being translated into English, so it fits that prompt. And it also won one of the major science fiction awards. I can't remember if it's the Nebula or Hugo Award, or maybe it won both. But that's another goal of mine, is kind of make my way through those lists. So this kind of meets two criteria. I'm not sure what it's about, but I know a lot of people have read it and enjoyed it. So I'm going to add this book to my list for this month. All right, so let's roll again and see what we get for our second prompt. All right, so for our second prompt, we rolled a 6. And we landed on blue. So let's grab the blue bag. So this bag is the bag that's really going to change month to month. In it, there are prompts that have to do with the season. For this season, that's obviously summer. There are prompts that have to do with the month of the year. And for this month, it's September. And that's where some of the fall prompts will come in. And then there's also prompts that have to do with the astrological signs of the month. And for September, that's Virgo and Libra. So there's a wide range of prompts in here that are going to change as we go from month to month. All right, so let's choose our second prompt of the game. So for this prompt, we got read a book with a simple, clean cover. We need a simple cover. So I found 3 books that have pretty simple and clean covers. First up, again, is Truly Devious, which we kind of already talked about. I feel like this cover, it's mostly blue. It's got the words sticking out. There's not a lot going on with it. So I think this is a simple, clean cover. We also have September by Rosamund Pilcher. So Rosamund Pilcher is kind of one of my favorite just plain fiction authors. My favorite book by her is Winter Solstice, and I love reading that book every winter because it kind of really puts you into the winter mood. This book is obviously September, so based on fall. That's really all it says about that. It's based in Scotland. I figure it's a good, simple, clean cover as well. It's got a leaf and just some words on it. And then last up is To the Hermitage by Malcolm Bradbury. So this book takes place in 2 timelines. The first is in the 1700s, where a philosopher is invited to the Winter Palace by Catherine the Great to hopefully convince her to accept some liberal reforms. And the second timeline takes place in the 1900s, when a group receives a grant to go research the philosopher's past. And while this is happening, there's actually a revolt against the new Russian democracy at the same time. So this is the third option. And I think I'm going to go with this option. The story sounds interesting, and I've actually had this book for a very long time, so I think it's about time I put this book onto my TBR. And we already have a fantasy and a science fiction book, so a historical fiction book will be a perfect addition for the fall. All right, so To the Hermitage. So the book I'm going to read for this prompt, the electronic book, is Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie. So this is obviously a mystery book by Agatha Christie. This book features one of her detectives, Hercule Poirot. And this book takes place on a train where they have to solve a mystery when a person is murdered on board the train. The reason I'm adding this book is that every year I choose a random country for each month of the year and have to read a book either from that country or a book written by the author. And for the month of September, that country is Serbia. This book actually takes place before Serbia was formed, but the book does take place in Yugoslavia, which is what the country Serbia was before it gained its independence. So we're going to read Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie. All right, so time for our third roll. All right, so we rolled an 8. And we landed on green. So we landed on green for our third prompt. So let's grab the green bag and see what we get. So in this bag, there are prompts that have to do with the title of the book. There's another 10 miscellaneous prompts and then another 5 series prompts as well. So let's see what we get. So we got a book with a 5-word title. All right, so we have to find a book that has 5 words in the title. Let's see what we have to choose from. So I found 3 books that have 5 letters in the title. There's a couple of others, but I narrowed it down to these 3 rather. The first up is Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. This takes place by Susanna Clarke. This takes place in the 1800s in England. while England is involved in the Napoleonic Wars. These two are magicians, and Mr. Norrell takes Jonathan Strange under his wing as a student, and the two kind of help England fight France during these wars. But then Jonathan Strange starts using more and more dangerous magic, which puts a strain on his relationship with Mr. Norrell, and also on everything else that he holds dear. So that's our first option. Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. It is a pretty long book, though. I think it's... how long is it? It's over 1,800 pages. Next up is Breaking All the Rules by Amy Andrews. So this is a romance book. It follows a woman named Beatrice who is a workaholic, always doing what she's supposed to, always following all the rules. But then all of a sudden, she decides that it's time for her to do things on her own terms. So she moves to nowhere, Colorado. And in Colorado, there lives a cop named Austin Cooper, who she first meets outside a cafe for her flagrant disregard for appropriate clothing. And then the book, I assume, just kind of follows their relationship and goes on from there. So that's our second option, Breaking All the Rules. And then last up is Nights of Rain and Stars by Maeve Binchy. This book actually takes place in Greece, on a small Greek island, and follows a bunch of people, both local residents and travelers, and kind of follows their stories on this little Greek island. So those are our three options. I think I'm going to go with Breaking All the Rules. We don't have a romance book yet on our TBR. So let's put this one on it. It seems like a good kind of fall read. Summer into fall read. And then for her electronic book, I again know exactly which book I'm going to read. There's 3 books I hope I was going to get onto my TBR for the electronic book, and this is the third out of the 3, so this worked out really well for these prompts. So we're going to go with Reunited at Sugar Maple Road by Debbie Mason. So this is a romance book. It's actually her third romance series. Her first 2 series I really enjoyed. The first one was Christmas in Colorado. The second one, I don't remember the name of the series. It might have been like Harmony Harbor or something like that. This one takes place in the mountains of, I believe, North Carolina. This is the 6th book in this series. So Debbie Mason's probably my favorite romance writer, just because her books are so much fun to read. They're cozy, nothing too spicy in them, and the storylines are always fun. So I'm going to put this on my TBR for September. It just released a couple of days ago, so I'm excited to add this to my TBR. Now it's time for the 4th prompt. Now that I got all 3 of my electronic books that I wanted to read this month on it, I'm excited to see what our last 4 books are going to be. So let's spin the wheel. Or, we're not spinning the wheel, let's roll the dice. Alright, so we got an 8 again. And this time we landed on orange. Alright, so this time we landed on orange, and now we have pulled a prompt from every color bag that we have. So this bag has prompts that have to do with the cover of the book, miscellaneous prompts as well, and then 5 series prompts are in it. So let's see what we get for our fourth prompt of the game. Alright, we got a cover prompt, and it is a illustrated cover. So all I mean by that is somebody drew it. So that's going to be pretty easy to find because most of these covers are hand-drawn. Let's narrow it down and see what we're going to choose from. So I have narrowed it down to 3 books. 2 we've already seen before, and then a 3rd new one. So let's do the 2 that we've seen before. So again, September by Rosamund Pilcher. It being September, this should be a good month to read this book. And again, Rosamund Pilcher is one of my kind of favorite regular fiction authors. Again, we have Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson, I think for the 3rd time. That will be an option as well. And then the new book is Touched by Magic by Dorana Durgan. So this is an older book. It's a fantasy book. It was written back in 1996. I have read this I don't know how many times, but it's just a fun little magic fantasy book. There's unicorns in it. It has a nice little illustrated cover with those unicorns. So that'll be our 3rd option. And I think actually for this month, I'm going to go with September. It being September, this seems like the perfect book to put on the TBR. So we'll add September to our physical book TBR, and then let's look at our electronic books. The electronic books most of them were actually pictures of people on the cover, so I rolled out a bunch of those books. Let me get my list so I can remind myself what these books are about. So first up is The Awakening of Ren Crown. This is by Anne Zoll, and it's book 1 of the Ren Crown series. So this is a fantasy book that centers around Ren Crown, who attends an elite magic school. And while she's at that magic school, she's found to have these unique powers that are very different and peculiar from the other students' powers. And because of that, now the people on the wrong side are out to get her. So she has to decide how far she's willing to go to save those she loves. So that's the first option, The Awakening of Ren Crown. Next up is The Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett. This is book 1 of the Kingsbridge series, and it takes place in the Middle Ages in England, and it centers around the construction of the cathedral, and it follows a wide range of people in this town and how the building of this cathedral kind of affects the town itself and the people around them. This is a very long one though, it's over 1,000 pages. So I don't know if we're going to add that one to this TBR. And then last up is The Gifted School by Bruce Halsinger. So this book is centered around a community, around a group of parents whose children have grown up together. And then in this community, a private school for gifted children have opened. So it kind of goes through the dilemma of who gets to go to that school, the interactions between the different families, and the drama all of this causes. So those are our 3 options. I think I'm going to go with The Awakening of Ren Crown, it being fantasy and fall and a magic school. They all give me kind of fall vibes. So we're going to try this out. This will be the first time I've read a book by this author. So we'll see how it is. So The Awakening of Ren Crown will be our 4th electronic book. Alright, so let's roll the dice again and see what we get for our 5th prompt. So we got a 5 and another orange. Alright, so let's choose from the orange bag again. Again, this has the cover, miscellaneous, and series prompts. So let's see what we get. Alright, got a cover prompt that is a cover that only has words. Don't know if we have a booklet. Let's find out. Alright, so I found 2 books that we can choose from this prompt. The first up is Sleepwalk by Dan Cheon. So I have no idea what this book is about, so I'm just going to quickly look at the back cover. Sounds like it's about a man called Will Bear who has many aliases that he just thinks of himself as the Barely Blur. So he's a henchman, apparently. Has a complicated and a lonely past. So he jumps between state lines with his van and his dog as a companion, running sometimes shady operations for bad people. And it looks like he has many burner phones, and one of them suddenly rings, and on the other side is a woman who's claiming to be his biological daughter. So that's what this book is about, Sleepwalk. Then there are other options, a nonfiction book called The Science of Evil, on Empathy and the Origins of Cruelty by Simon Baron Cohen. So this book looks at the science of compassion and calls for major changes in the way we think about and treat human cruelty. So that's our other option. So it's kind of good, like for people who like to watch, shows like Criminal Minds and read thrillers. It's kind of is like the nonfiction basis for some of these books. So I think I am going to read Sleepwalk though, and see how this goes as an interesting premise. So we'll try this book. Not really in a mood for a nonfiction book this month. All right, and then for non-fiction, for electronic books, we have not too many options. So our only option, it looks like, that just has words is Doomsday Book by Connie Willis. This is book 1 in the Oxford Time series, which is about time travelers. So in this book, there's a student that goes back, I think, into the 14th century, which is obviously dangerous with disease, fighting all of that stuff, and she gets stuck there, and her mentors have to figure out a way how to get her back. And it looks like the author, at least, is the winner of Hugo and Nebula Awards. Maybe this book is as well, I'm not sure. So we'll put that on our list. Doomsday Book by Connie Willis. Alright, so now we are on to our sixth spin, our second to last spin. So let's see what we get. Alright, so for our second to last spin, we got a 7. That takes us to a green circle. Alright, so for our 6th roll, we landed on green. So again, this bag has prompts that have to do with the title, some miscellaneous prompts, and some series prompts. So let's see what we get. We got 2. This one. So green means it's a miscellaneous prompt, and it is a Hugo, Locus, or Nebula award-winning book. We're gonna have to bring out some Wikipedia, see if I have any of those books on the shelves. Oh, here we go. Jonathan Strange and Mr. Nora. We already had that. Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell won the Hugo Award in 2005. So again, this is a book by Susanna Clarke that's set in ancient England with these two magicians during the Napoleonic Wars. So of course, this book is on the Hugo Award list, the 800 and some page book, but we will add it and then look at our electronic books and see if we have one of those that fit the list. So these are the Locus Awards for Best Science Fiction Novel, and in 2018, The Collapsing Empire won, and The Collapsing Empire happens to be on my electronic TBR for this month to choose from. So we'll be choosing The Collapsing Empire by John Scalzi, which is book 1 of the Interdependency. Got my notes. So this book is set in a universe where faster than light travel is possible by something called the flow. And the flow is eternal, it lasts forever, but it's not static, so it kind of moves around and no one knows why and no one knows how to control it. It's just one day it's discovered that the flow is moving again, and it may cut off all human worlds from faster than light travel forever. So individuals are in a race against time to see what can be salvaged from this interstellar empire that's now on the brink of collapse. Alright, so that will be our 6th electronic TBR read, The Collapsing Empire by John Scalzi. And I'm really bad at pronouncing names, so forgive me for that. Alright, so let's move on to our 7th roll of the game. Alright, so for our last roll, we got a 7, and we landed on blue. Let's grab the blue bag. So this is the bag that has the seasonal, monthly, and astrological sign prompts in it. So let's see what we get for our last prompt of September. Alright, so we got read a book whose title has a word that is greater than or equal to 7 letters. Alright. Let's find a book that has a word that is at least 7 letters long. So I have a ton of books who have at least one word that's 7 letters or longer, so I have narrowed it down to these 3 books. First up is Spellbreaker by Charlie N. Holmberg. This is a fantasy book that takes place in the world where there are either people who can create spells or people who can break them. It follows a young girl named Elsie Camden, who happens to be a spellbreaker. She's taken under the wing by a elite magic user named Bacchus Kelsey, who's one spell away from mastership when he catches Elsie breaking one of his spells. So she agrees to help him fix his unruly spells around his estate as long as he doesn't turn her in. While she's doing this, she comes to realize that there's a rise in the murders of wizards and the theft of the spell books that their bodies leave behind. So this book is her learning not only how to control her powers, but also about who her family is and the dangers that she has to traverse through this life. All right, so that's what we got. Spellbreaker, first choice. Next up is The Secret Chapter by Genevieve Cogman. This is book 6 in the Invisible Library series. This is also a fantasy series. These books are nice, easy reads, and I really enjoy them. I have read, books 1 through 5. So this book takes place in a world where there are, well, it's not even a world, it takes place in a universe where there's a lot of alternate Earths that have their own histories. And the librarians are tasked to make sure that these worlds stay in balance. And so what that means is that out in the universe, there are dragons who like order, and there are fae who like chaos. And the librarians need to balance this order and chaos so that, worlds don't go crazy, basically. And to do this, they bring in special editions of books that are only found in certain worlds. They bring them into the library, and this helps maintain the balance between the order and chaos out in the universe. So this is, like I said, the 6th book in the series, so this is an option as well, as chapter is 7 letters long. And then last up, again, for the 4th time, is Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson. Devious being 7 letters long. Again, most of you know what this book is about, but it follows a girl named Stevie who's a true crime aficionado who enrolls in a private school in Vermont that is known for a unsolved crime, and this series follows Stevie as she attempts to solve this unsolved crime. And this time I am going to put this onto my list. This seems like the perfect fall book, especially for September, which is the start of school and the start of the fall season, and mysteries are great for the fall. So we'll add Truly Devious to our September TBR. And that leaves us with having to pick one more electronic book. So let's take a look at those. There's plenty of books to choose from on the electronic TBRs. A lot of those books have words that are 7 or longer. Have 7 or more letters within the words. So I have again narrowed it down to 3 books. We have a mystery book, a romance book, and a nonfiction book. So first up is the romance book. It's called Hot Property by Suzanne O'Leary. This book is the first book in the the first book in the Carrie series. It takes place in Ireland and follows Megan O'Farrell, who has just inherited her uncle's house in a remote part of Ireland on the Atlantic coast. Initially, she plans on selling the home, but as she is getting it ready to be sold, she finds an old family scandal, and then also becomes entranced by both the landscape in Ireland as well as a man in Ireland. And so now she has to learn how to deal with this country life as well as a conspiracy of the town to make her leave. So this is the first option, Hot Property. Next up is our mystery book. It's A King of Infinite Space by Tyler Dilks. This book is the first book in the Long Beach homicide series. Cannot pronounce words at the end of this video. So this book follows Detective Danny Beckett, who's called in when a high school teacher is found murdered. So he must solve the case, and while solving the case, he also has to learn how to come to terms with his past. So that's the second option. And then our last option is the nonfiction book called The Last Days of the Romanovs. This is book 1 in the Romanov sister series. So it's a nonfiction book that follows the Romanovs, who were the Russian imperial family, and it goes in the early 1900s, and it goes through the last 14 days of their lives before they were murdered on the night of July 16th into the 17th. So that's our third option. And I think I'm going to choose Hot Property by Suzanne O'Leary. It sounds like an easy, fun read to end the month with. That will be our last book that we choose for the month of September. So let's go through the books that we chose for September. The big stack. All right, so let's start. So for our prompt that has to have a word that's 7 letters or longer, we have Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson and Hot Properties by Susanna O'Leary. For our prompt that it has to be either a Hugo, Nebula, or Locus Award winner, we have Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, who was a Hugo Award winner. And we have The Collapsing Empire by John Scalzi, who was a Locus Award winner. For our prompt that has to have just words on the title, we have Sleepwalk by Dan Schoen and Doomsday Book by Connie Willis. For the prompt that it has to be an illustrated cover, we have September by Rosamund Pilcher, and we have The Awakening of Ren Crown by Anne Zoel. For the prompt, it has to have 5 words in the title. We have Breaking All the Rules by Amy Andrews and Reunited at Sugar Maple Road by Debbie Mason. For a simple cover, we have To the Hermitage by Malcolm Bradbury and Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie. And lastly, for our prompt, it has to be in a trilogy. We have Scarlet Odyssey by C.T. Rowitzi and The 30-Body Problem by Lou. Alright, so that will be the TBR list for the month of September. Now, I only have to read either the electronic version of a book or the physical book for each prompt. I don't have to read both. If you have any thoughts about which book I should read for each prompt, feel free to comment below. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. And if you would like to see more videos from me, please hit the subscribe button. Otherwise, I really enjoyed making this video and I hope you enjoyed watching it. And I will see you next time. Thank you so much. Bye. I'll see you later.